For years I tried to earn a place in my husband's family. They lived in a beautiful historic home in Savannah, Georgia, the very picture of Southern grace. But behind the veil of old money charm, they harbored a dark and predatory secret, a most horrifying tradition family ritual designed to test, control, and ultimately destroy anyone who threatened their perfect parasitic world. I was their next target. After they humiliated me in the most public way possible, I discovered the truth about their years of gaslighting and manipulation. They thought I would crumble. They didn't know I was taking notes. This isn't just a revenge story. It's the story of how I uncovered the twisted secret in a dead man's will and systematically dismantled a narcissistic dynasty, piece by painful piece. This is the story of how I took back my life. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. This is an invoice for a party that never happened. Or rather, a party that happened, just not for the person it was meant for. It's a bill for $37,482. It's the price of a catered dinner for 100 people, a string quartet, a master patissier cake, and an open bar stocked with top-shelf everything. Most people would call this a bill for a party. I call it the price of my own liberation. This is the bill for the day I learned my husband's family wasn't just cold. They were predatory, and they had a tradition. A most horrifying tradition. To understand how I ended up paying the price of a new car for a party I threw for my own revenge, you have to understand the family I married into, the De Winters of Savannah, Georgia. When I first met my husband, Liam, the name meant nothing to me. I was just a grad student in landscape architecture at SCAD, buried in projects and dreaming of designing beautiful timeless gardens. He was an architect too, but of a different sort. He built software companies. Liam was a breath of fresh air in a city that can sometimes feel suffocating with the weight of its own history. He was brilliant, funny, and he had this kindness in his eyes that felt like coming home. He was also completely unpretentious, which, as I would later learn, was a minor miracle given his upbringing. He never talked about his family's money or their standing in the city. He talked about code, about building elegant systems, about the future. We fell in love fast and hard. It was the kind of love that felt both exciting and inevitable. When he took me to meet his family for the first time, I was nervous, but I was also hopeful. I come from a small, loud, loving family in Ohio. Family's everything to me. I wanted so badly to be a part of his. The De Winter ancestral home is on a quiet, gaslit street in the historic district, a 3-story Georgian masterpiece dripping with ivy and secrets. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a change in the atmosphere. It was like walking from the warm, humid Savannah air into a perfectly preserved, climate-controlled museum. And I was the exhibit that didn't quite belong. Liam's mother, Genevieve, was the curator. A woman of immaculate taste and terrifying poise, she greeted me with a smile that never reached her cold blue eyes. She appraised me, from my shoes to my dress to the way I held my wine glass, and I felt myself shrinking under her gaze. His younger siblings, the twins Caleb and Sophie, were her loyal acolytes. They were in their early 20s, possessed of a lazy, aristocratic beauty and an air of profound boredom. They moved through the world as if it were a party being thrown in their honor, and they were perpetually unimpressed with the service. They flanked their mother, mirroring her cool detachment, their smirks like tiny, identical daggers. The dinner was a masterclass in covert hostility. Every question was a test, every compliment was a backhanded slap. "Lara, is it?" Genevieve began, her voice like crushed velvet. "Liam tells us you design yards. How quaint." "I'm a landscape architect," I said, forcing a smile. "I specialize in historical garden restoration." "Oh, of course," she'd replied, taking a delicate sip of wine. "A lovely little hobby," Sophie chimed in. "We have a gardener for that. Miguel. He's wonderful." It went on like that all night. They would ask Liam about his latest business venture, their eyes gleaming with interest, and the second I would try to contribute to the conversation, the energy would just die. They wouldn't be rude, not overtly. They would just stop responding, their gazes would drift away, leaving my words to hang in the air and wither. It was a form of psychological warfare, making me feel insignificant, invisible. This became the pattern of my life for the next 3 years. I loved Liam. I was building a beautiful life with him. But every interaction with his family was like pressing on a bruise. The gaslighting was constant and subtle. If I ever mentioned to Liam that I felt like his mother was being cold, he'd get this pained look on his face. "Mom's just formal, Lara," he'd say. "She's from a different generation. She doesn't mean anything by it. You might be reading too much into it." He wasn't being malicious. He was caught in the middle, a peacekeeper trying to manage 2 worlds that wouldn't align. And because I loved him, I'd accept his explanation. I'd tell myself he was right. I was being too sensitive. I needed to try harder. That's learned helplessness. You're in a situation you can't control, so you start to believe the fault lies with you, that if you just change your own behavior you can fix it. I became obsessed with fixing it, with winning them over. I hosted flawless dinner parties. I remembered their birthdays with thoughtful, expensive gifts. I learned the names of their friends, their favorite charities, their preferred vintages of Chardonnay. I contorted myself into the perfect daughter-in-law, hoping that one day they would finally see me, that they would finally accept me into the fold. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. I knew, on some level, that their behavior was cruel, but I couldn't reconcile that with the image of the perfect, loving family I so desperately wanted to be a part of. The breaking point, and the beginning of the end, came with Genevieve's 60th birthday. To me, this was the ultimate opportunity. I would throw her a party so magnificent, so thoughtful, so undeniably perfect, that she would have no choice but to finally embrace me. It wouldn't just be a party, it would be a statement. A testament to my devotion to her, and to the De Winter family. I decided to go all out. I booked the Telfair Academy, a stunning art museum in the heart of Savannah. I hired the city's most sought-after event planner and caterer. I worked with a historian to create a beautiful retrospective of the De Winter family legacy, to be projected onto a screen during the cocktail hour. I commissioned a string quartet to play Vivaldi, Genevieve's favorite. I spent months on every detail, from the hand-calligraphed invitations to the custom monogrammed linen napkins. And I paid for it all myself, out of the savings from my own burgeoning business. It was a gesture of extravagant love. Or so I thought. Liam, to his credit, was wary from the start. "Elara, baby, you don't have to do this," he told me one night, looking over the mounting pile of invoices on my desk. "This is a lot." "It's her 60th, Liam," I argued. "It's a milestone. I want it to be special. I want her to know how much I care." Sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They don't make it easy to care about them." It was the most critical thing I had ever heard him say about his family, and it felt like a small crack of light in a dark room. But I was too far gone in my mission. "I can win them over," I insisted, full of a naive confidence that now makes my stomach turn. "Sure, I know I can." I tried to involve Caleb and Sophie in the planning. I called them, excited to share my ideas for the menu and the floral arrangements. Their response was a collective, bored sigh. "Elara, this is clearly your passion project," Sophie said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, you seem to have it all under control. We wouldn't want to get in your way. Just tell us when to show up." So, I did it all myself. For 3 months, I poured my heart, my soul, and a frightening amount of my money into planning the perfect party for a woman who looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. The day before the event, everything was in place. The museum was being prepped, the caterers were confirmed, the flowers were ordered. That evening, Liam and I went to Genevieve's house to give her a small, personal birthday gift before the big surprise the next day. We walked into the drawing room, and they were all there. Genevieve, Caleb, and Sophie, arranged on the silk damask sofas like a royal portrait. They looked up when we entered, and I saw a flicker of something in their eyes, a shared, secret amusement. After some stilted small talk, I couldn't contain my excitement any longer. I took a deep breath. "Genevieve," I began, smiling brightly. "We know your birthday is tomorrow, but the real celebration is happening at 7 p.m. at the Telfair. We've planned a little surprise party for you." We laid it all out. The 100 guests, her oldest friends flying in from all over the country, the quartet, the retrospective. I watched her face, expecting to see surprise, then delight, then maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of affection. Instead, her face became a mask of ice. She was silent for a long moment. Then she turned her gaze, not to me but to Liam. "That was certainly ambitious of you. Thank you." "Don't thank me, Mom," Liam said immediately, taking my hand. "This was all Elara, every last detail. She's been working on it for months." He squeezed my hand, and I felt a surge of love for him. He was trying to give me the credit, trying to force them to see me. But all he did was point the spotlight, and they opened fire. Genevieve's eyes swiveled to me, and the polite facade finally, completely dropped away. "Is that so?" she said, her voice dangerously soft. She set her porcelain teacup down on its saucer with a delicate, sharp click. "Unwell, Elara. I appreciate the effort. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding," I asked, my smile starting to feel brittle. "My 60th birthday is a significant milestone," she continued, her voice radiating a chilling authority. "It is a celebration of the continuation of the De Winter family legacy. It is an event for family, and for those we consider family." She let the words hang in the air. Caleb and Sophie were watching me now, their faces alight with undisguised glee. This was the show they'd been waiting for. I don't understand," I stammered, though a cold dread was beginning to seep into my bones. "It's quite simple," Genevieve said, her eyes boring into me. You are not a doinner. You are not a doinner. That is a legal arrangement. It does not make you family. It would be entirely inappropriate for you, an outsider, to be the hostess of such an intimate and significant family event. Your presence would disrupt the integrity of the occasion. So thank you for the arrangements. Liam and I and the rest of our family will be there at 7. You, of course, will not be expected. The room fell silent. The only sound was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall, counting down the seconds of my public execution. She had not only uninvited me from the party I had planned and paid for, she had declared, in the clearest possible terms, that I would never belong. That after 3 years of marriage, of trying, of loving her son, I was still nothing more than a legal arrangement. I looked at Liam. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle was twitching in his cheek. He looked shocked, horrified, but he didn't speak. He was frozen. The years of conditioning, of being taught never to defy his mother, had paralyzed him. And in his silence something inside me broke. The part of me that had been so desperate for their approval, the part that kept telling myself to just try harder, it shattered into a million pieces. And what was left behind was cold, hard, and furious. I looked from Genevieve's triumphant, cruel face to the smug smirks of her children. They were savoring this. This was their tradition. This was the moment they put the outsider in her place. I stood up. My hands weren't shaking. My voice, when it came out, was steady. "You're right, Genevieve," I said. "There has been a misunderstanding." Eli saw a flicker of confusion on her face. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. I was supposed to cry. I was supposed to beg. They misunderstood, I continued, a strange, giddy sense of power flooding through me. I misunderstood that you were a person deserving of my time, my respect, and my money. So let me be perfectly clear. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the string quartet, they were all booked by me. They were all paid for by me. And since I am not welcome, then I am afraid the party is no longer happening. The smirks vanished from Caleb and Sophie's faces. Genevieve's mask of poise cracked. "What did you say?" she hissed. "I'm canceling," I said, allowing myself a small, sharp smile. "There is no party. The Telfair will be dark. Your friends who flew in will have a lovely, unexpected holiday in Savannah. I will, of course, be sending them a note explaining the sudden change of plans due to your particular family values." "You wouldn't dare," Genevieve whispered, her face turning a blotchy red. "And why would?" I said. "You wanted a celebration of the De Winter family legacy. Then please, by all means, gather your children tomorrow and celebrate. Perhaps you can order a pizza. My treat." I turned to Liam, who was staring at me with a look of utter shock and something else, admiration. "Admiraving," I said. It wasn't a request. As we walked to the door, Genevieve found her voice. "And you are a cruel, vindictive little girl," she shrieked, her carefully constructed composure completely gone. "You're trying to ruin me." I paused at the door and looked back at her. "I'm not trying to ruin you. I'm just getting started." We walked out into the humid Savannah night, leaving a stunned silence behind us. Liam didn't say a word on the drive home. He just drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. When we got back to our house, he walked straight to the bar and poured himself a large scotch, which he downed in one go. I, on the other hand, felt a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I pulled out my phone and my laptop. I didn't cancel everything. That would be a waste of money. And I suddenly had a much, much better idea. I called the event planner. "There's been a change of theme for tomorrow night's party," I told her. "It's no longer a 60th birthday. The new theme is new beginnings." I had her change the signage, scrap the family retrospective, and change the playlist from Vivaldi to Florence Shaw the Machine. Then I started making calls and sending texts. I invited all of my own friends. I invited my favorite clients. I told Liam to invite his friends, the real ones, the ones from his own life, not the ones he'd inherited from his family. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I paid for a $37,000 party," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "And we are going to have a $37,000 party, but it's going to be our party, not hers." The next day I woke up to a barrage of texts from my sisters-in-law, a torrent of abuse and guilt-tripping. I blocked their numbers without reading past the first few words. That night, Liam and I walked into the Telfair Academy. It was breathtaking. The flowers were glorious, the music was soaring, the champagne was flowing. But instead of being filled with the cold, judgmental ghosts of the De Winter clan, it was filled with our people. People who loved us. People who were there to celebrate us. I had taken their stage, their set, their props, and rewritten the entire play. Halfway through the night, I posted a single photo on my Instagram. It was a picture of me and Liam, laughing, our arms around each other, raising our champagne glasses. In the background, a large, beautifully designed banner was clearly visible. It read, "Cheers to new beginnings." I captioned it, "Sometimes you have to burn down the old house to let the light in." Feeling so blessed to be surrounded by our real family tonight. I knew Genevieve would see it. I knew the entire social world of Savannah would see it. It was my first shot across the bow, and as I danced with my husband, surrounded by the warmth and laughter of my friends, I felt a fierce, joyful power. I survived the proving. But I wasn't just a survivor, I was a warrior. And the war had just begun. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch. The morning after the party, our house was quiet. It was the heavy, humming silence that follows a storm. Liam was in the kitchen, staring into a coffee cup as if it held the answers to the universe. The rage and adrenaline of the past 48 hours had subsided, leaving behind a field of emotional debris. "You were incredible last night," he said, his voice low. He wouldn't look at me. He was ashamed. Ashamed of them, but also of his own silence, his own paralysis in that moment at his mother's house. "So I did what I had to do," I said, sitting down across from him. "The question is, what do we do now?" The answer came in the form of a phone call. It was Genevieve. Liam's hand trembled as he looked at the screen. He silenced the call, but she immediately called back, and again. Then the texts started, a flood of them, a digital tirade of guilt, blame, and narcissistic rage. "You have let that horrible woman destroy this family. Your father would be so ashamed of you. After everything I have done for you, this is how you repay me?" He finally turned the phone off and slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Alara," he mumbled into his palms. "And you don't deserve this. I should have stopped it, years ago." And then, for the first time, he told me everything. Not just the vague feelings of frustration, but the whole, ugly, rotten story. He told me about the proving. It wasn't just a feeling I had, it was a real thing. A conscious, deliberate strategy his mother had implemented after his father's death. He called it their most horrifying tradition. Whenever he or his siblings brought a serious partner into the fold, the partner was subjected to a brutal, unspoken hazing ritual. The goal was twofold. First, to see if the person could be broken down and controlled, made to understand that their allegiance must be to the Dwiner family unit above all else. Second, if they showed any sign of independence or threatened to pull her child away from her orbit, the goal was to systematically destroy the relationship and oust the partner. He told me about 2 other girlfriends before me. One was a brilliant law student who Genevieve had subtly branded as a social climber, poisoning her reputation within their circle until she was a pariah. The other was a warm, funny artist who was dismissed as unstable and not Dwiner material. In both cases, his mother and siblings had created a non-stop campaign of subtle sabotage, emotional blackmail, and manufactured drama until the relationships crumbled under the weight. "I knew what they were doing," Liam confessed, his voice thick with self-loathing. "But I was weak. I was trapped. Every time I tried to push back, she'd bring up my father. She'd cry and say I was abandoning them, that I was breaking the promise I made to him on his deathbed to keep the family together." He had been caught in a trauma bond, tethered to his abusers by a toxic cocktail of love, guilt, and a deeply ingrained sense of duty. His mother wasn't just his mother. She was the warden of his late father's memory, and she wielded it like a weapon. The codependency was absolute. They needed his money and he needed their approval to feel like he was being a good son. "But why?" I asked, my mind reeling. "Why go to such lengths? It's not just about control. This is pathological." William finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it stole my breath. "Because it's not just about control," he said. "It's about the money. It's always been about the money." And then he revealed the plot twist, the secret that underpinned their entire horrifying tradition. His father, a shrewd man who had known his wife's manipulative nature all too well, had left behind a complex and very specific will. The family fortune, the house, the stocks, the art, millions of dollars, was held in a trust. Liam was the trustee. He was required to provide his mother and siblings with a generous but not unlimited lifestyle. They had no direct control over the principal, but the will contained a secret clause, a ticking time bomb. The clause stated that if Liam, his eldest son, married and remained continuously married for a period of 5 years, and if that marriage was not formally and legally blessed in writing by his mother, Genevieve, then on the date of their 5th wedding anniversary, the majority of the trust's assets, 75% of the entire Dwiner fortune, would be immediately and irrevocably transferred to a designated beneficiary, the National Trust for Historic Preservation. His father had created an escape hatch for him, a way to finally break free. He had given Liam a choice: stay tethered to his toxic family forever, or find a partner strong enough to withstand 5 years of their abuse, and in doing so, win his freedom and theirs. Our 5th wedding anniversary was in 6 months. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Everything clicked into place. The escalating hostility, the frantic, desperate cruelty of the birthday party showdown. It wasn't just a hazing ritual. It was a last-ditch, panicked attempt to blow up our marriage before the deadline. They weren't just trying to put me in my place, they were trying to save their inheritance. They know about the clause, I whispered. My father, God rest his soul, thought it would be a secret, Liam said with a bitter laugh. But he underestimated my mother's ability to sniff out a threat. She had her lawyer get a copy of the will years ago. She's known about it the whole time. The proving wasn't just about control. It was a race against the clock. And the sheer, diabolical brilliance of it was staggering, and the depth of their greed was nauseating. They were willing to sabotage their own son's happiness, to emotionally torture him for years, all to maintain their parasitic lifestyle. That knowledge changed everything. This was no longer just a family squabble. This was a high-stakes financial war, and they had just shown their hand. And so what do we do? I asked, my voice now as cold and clear as his had been moments before. We have 6 months. We fight back, he said, and for the first time I saw the brilliant, ruthless strategist he was in his business life emerge from the shadow of the dutiful son. The trauma bond was snapping, and no more reacting, we go on the offensive. The first step was to build a fortress. We met with a high-powered family law attorney, a woman who looked like she ate corporate raiders for breakfast. We laid out the whole story, the will, the proving, the financial dependency, the harassment. She listened intently, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "This is beautiful," she said when we were done. "It's a classic case of undue influence and tortious interference. They've been actively trying to interfere with your marital contract for financial gain. We can bury them." Under her guidance, we began to systematically cut them off. Liam, as trustee, had the legal right to review and approve all their expenses. The endless shopping sprees at high-end boutiques, the European holidays, the country club memberships, they were all shut down. He replaced their unlimited credit cards with modest debit cards tied to a strict monthly stipend, as outlined in the trust. It was just enough to live on, but not enough to live lavishly. The reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. They went from manipulative to completely unhinged. They started a smear campaign, telling everyone in their social circle that I was a gold digger who had brainwashed Liam and was trying to steal the family money. It was textbook narcissistic projection, accusing me of the very sins they were committing. But we were prepared. Our lawyer had advised us to get ahead of the narrative. We hosted a small private dinner for a few of Savannah's most influential community leaders, people who sat on charity boards and whose opinions carried weight. At that dinner, Liam, with me by his side, told a carefully curated version of the truth. He spoke of his father's unique will and his desire to see the bulk of his fortune go towards historic preservation, a cause dear to his heart. He framed it not as a family feud, but as him and me trying to honor his father's final wishes against the more materialistic desires of his other family members. It was a brilliant move. We co-opted the moral high ground. The real escalation came when Genevieve, Caleb, and Sophie, realizing their social tactics were failing, did the one thing we were waiting for. They got a lawyer and sued us. The lawsuit was a work of fiction. It claimed that I had exerted undue influence over Liam, that I was coercing him into mismanaging the trust, and that I was systematically alienating him from his family for my own financial gain. They petitioned the court for an emergency injunction to have Liam removed as trustee, and to have the 5-year clause in the will declared null and void. They thought they were cornering us. What they were actually doing was walking straight into our trap. A lawsuit means discovery. It means depositions. It means sworn testimony and the subpoena of financial records. They had just given us the legal authority to put their entire parasitic lifestyle under a microscope. The revenge was not going to be a loud, explosive affair. It was going to be a quiet, meticulous, and legally binding demolition. Our lawyer went to work. She subpoenaed a decade's worth of bank records for Genevieve, Caleb, and Sophie. She requested their employment histories, or lack thereof. She deposed them for hours, asking pointed questions under oath about their careers, their contributions to the family, and the source of their income. The depositions were a bloodbath. Caleb, who listed his profession as a freelance consultant, was forced to admit under oath that he had not had a single paying client in 5 years. Sophie, who called herself an aspiring artist, couldn't produce a single receipt for a sale of her work. Genevieve's testimony was a masterclass in narcissistic evasion, but under the relentless, precise questioning of our lawyer, her facade crumbled. She was forced to acknowledge that for 20 years, she had lived entirely off the largesse of the trust managed by the son she was now trying to destroy. But the final killing blow came from me. As a landscape architect specializing in historic properties, I had built a strong, respected relationship with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the very charity named in the will. I was not just a donor, I was a professional partner. They trusted me. I went to them. I sat down with their board of directors and their chief legal counsel. I walked them through the entire situation, the will, the trust, the lawsuit. I showed them how Genevieve and her children were actively trying to prevent a multi-million-dollar philanthropic gift from reaching their organization. Their reaction was exactly what I'd hoped for. They were appalled. And then they were activated. The National Trust, with its army of powerful lawyers and its immense public relations machine, officially joined our side of the lawsuit. They filed a motion to intervene, arguing that Genevieve was attempting to defraud a charitable organization of its rightful inheritance. Suddenly, this wasn't just a messy family squabble anymore. It was a legal battle between a greedy, dysfunctional family and one of the country's most beloved nonprofits. The optics were catastrophic for the De Winters. The final confrontation took place not in a courtroom, but in a sterile, wood-paneled mediation office. Genevieve, Caleb, and Sophie sat on one side of a massive mahogany table, their faces pale and drawn. Their lawyer looked like a man who regretted every decision that had led him to this moment. On our side it was me, Liam, our lawyer, and the lead counsel for the National Trust. Our lawyer laid out the terms. It was an unconditional surrender. They would drop their lawsuit immediately and with prejudice. They would sign a legally binding agreement promising to never again interfere in our marriage or our lives. In exchange, we would not pursue them for the legal fees they had forced us to incur, and the National Trust would not pursue a separate fraud case against them. Genevieve balked. "This is my family's money, my husband's legacy." The National Trust's lawyer, a silver-haired man with eyes like a hawk, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Mrs. De Winter," he said, his voice quiet but deadly, "your husband's legacy, as written in his legally executed will, is about to be the preservation of a dozen historic sites across this state. We have depositions that prove your children are functionally unemployable, and that you have been attempting to subvert your late husband's final wishes for your own personal enrichment. If we proceed to court, we will not only win, we will make a public example of you. Your name in this city will be mud, forever." The fight went out of them. They were defeated. They signed the papers. 3 months later, Liam and I celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary. We didn't have a party. We went to a small, quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant. At midnight, the clause in the will activated. 75% of the De Winter fortune was transferred. It was done. Genevieve and her children were forced to sell the house. I heard they moved to a smaller condo in a less fashionable part of town. The trust still provides them with their reasonable living stipend, but their days of casual luxury are over. Caleb had to get a job in retail. Sophie started teaching art classes to children. They were forced, for the first time in their lives, to participate in the real world. Liam and I are still in Savannah. We bought a beautiful historic property of our own, a little further out of the city. It was neglected, run down. But it has good bones, strong foundations. I'm standing in the garden now. I designed it myself. It's filled with native plants and reclaimed materials. It's a space of peace, of growth, of quiet strength. Liam is inside, on a call, building his next company. He is lighter now, free. The ghosts of his past have been exorcised. I sometimes think about that party, the one that started it all. I think about the anger, the humiliation. But I also think about the power I felt when I decided to fight back. They had a tradition designed to break people, but they miscalculated. They didn't realize they weren't just trying to break a person. They were trying to break an architect. And I know, better than anyone, that before you can build something new, something strong, something that will truly last, sometimes you have to burn the old blueprints and bring the whole damn house down.